Hey everyone, thank you for joining today. Sorry for the little technical difficulty as we're getting the access to the meeting. It's great seeing everyone. Just from the Element team, a very quick acknowledgement that you guys are seeing my screen and everything is good to go.
Yes, we can see and hear you.
Yes, sir.
All right, there we go. So we got, we will get started in just a second. This is being recorded and let's see, there is, oh. All right. Well, let's get started. So thanks everybody for joining us today. We're here to talk about Conversations 2.0. So one of the things that we've done, and if you're an Element partner now for a little while, or if you just joined as an Element partner, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Artis Kadir. I'm the founder and CEO of Element451. Perhaps I've been in some of your demos, or perhaps we've kind of talked, in the recent couple of months. You've received certain communications around our, kind of notion of, or not our conversations, anticipation on this new feature or this new capabilities being added to conversations. So this meeting today, it's going to be all about what we're introducing. It's going to be kind of a dive into taking a look at some of those conversations, kind of what's new, what's different, what are some of the new capabilities. Before we actually dive into the demos, I wanted to kind of describe a little bit about what we're going to talk and see today. So the first thing that we're going to see are, essentially our approach and our kind of problems that we're solving for, and what we tried to do when we started on the path of enhancing or redesigning conversations was two things. We first wanted to improve the experience, and Conversations was the first module or the first piece of component in Element that has been adopted to our new user experience UX kind of framework, which we're calling Bolt UI. We've sent a few different communications around Bolt UI, but Bolt UI is essentially a fresh UX on Element that will make it a lot easier for us to unify the UI, make it easier to kind of find things. It's a lot faster, make things much more accessible and contextualize and be able for you to see things a little bit differently from the profile, from conversations, from campaigns, and so on and so forth. So Bolt Conversations is the first one that is being redesigned with the Bolt UI interface. We changed the menu, but that's just a very kind of first entry into that. So what are the things that are essentially done to Conversations, or what's one of the other components that we wanted to accomplish was the ability to have anonymous conversations. And we wanted the ability for you to embed that into multiple places, not just Element properties. So these two things, right? So the ability for schools and for you to be more productive, and also to extend now the engagement capabilities of Element in other properties, in other landing pages, your own website. So those are the anonymous conversations. So we're going to talk about both of those today. But essentially, because we needed to accomplish both of those things, we ended up rewriting all of the conversations. So that's why it took us a little bit longer to bring this to fruition, is because we had to rewrite everything from the ground up. And we actually did a lot of improvements. So you're going to see a lot of small things or big things that you might, if you're using Conversations, you might have kind of told us about, or perhaps, didn't work as well as you wanted it to. But the first thing that you're going to notice is that speed. So the UI feels a lot crisper. The user experience feels a lot easier. You're able to kind of, do things a lot better. There's inline editing. So a lot of those things you're going to be able to see. Contextual sidebars is another thing that you're going to be able to see in here. We've enhanced essentially the context, so where now you can see the user in there, and I'll just go and show you that. Enhanced editor, so now you have the ability to do a lot more with the editor. And we've kind of gone ahead and done a full text search on your conversations. As you use more and more conversations, you need the ability to say, well, I need to get to that particular student, and I remember what they said, but I don't remember which student or conversation it was. And then the ability to kind of expand your view as you work more and more with it. So those are just some highlights that I have in here, and let's take a look at them before we actually go into some of the other areas of conversations, and we kind of look into those as well. So the first thing that I'm going to go into, and I have, I'm going to actually use like a sandbox environment. You know, this, you might notice that it's kind of Villa, one of the schools that we're kind of working with as part of the testing for conversations. But what you're seeing here is a new conversations UI and conversations screen. So the first thing that I want to show you here is the ability for you now to expand that screen. You have a sidebar on those conversations that you can see the person that you're talking to. You can kind of go to their full profile and get that context of that user in here. You can also go directly to their profile. So that's something that's really interesting that we've gotten a lot of feedback around, is we need more context on that user. The other thing is you also see related content around that user, right? So you see other conversations that they're part of, you see applications, you also can see multiple applications in here and other conversations as well. So essentially it's bringing the context into your conversation, so you don't have to now go into the other screens and take a look at it. So those are some of the kind of enhancements that we talked about, the sidebar, the ability to kind of expand this to full view. Of course, I can hide this sidebar altogether, so now you have even more room. And when we're talking about the editor, we now have the ability to say, okay, if I want to kind of start a new conversation, again, that you're going to see that starting a new conversation is pretty straightforward. You have the ability to pick a channel, an SMS or an email, and based on that channel, then the context changes down here. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of what these are, the from numbers and so on and so forth. But this is not necessarily a step-by-step on how to create a new conversation, but just giving you the highlights. So when looking at this, one of the things that you're going to notice is now you're going to have the ability to, and we'll talk about this inboxes, you're going to have the ability to pick where you want to send it from and how you're working with those inboxes. As we scroll down in here, you're going to see that the editor is also enhanced as well. And perhaps rather than me starting a new conversation, I'd like to go in here, and you're seeing that if I have an SMS conversation, that's going to appear a little bit differently. For example, it's going to appear a little bit differently than if I have an email conversation, right? So there's a difference there. And you're going to see that there's a little icon in here, if that's an SMS first channel conversation or an email first channel conversation. And you're going to also see it. This is a chat conversation in here. So you have those three different ways, but you can't actually initiate a chat. It has to be initiated by the student, and we'll see how that's done. But you can certainly start an email or SMS conversation. A couple of things in here as we kind of go along. We're talking about the enhancements that we did to the editor. So now we can, let's see, we can start sending communications directly through here. And if I can type, and if I can spell correctly, that will be great. As we kind of update this, we can also, before we're not necessarily able to add those images in line. However, we're able to do that now. So I can just add an image, and that image will kind of appear in line. So I can align it left, And now I can have, more content in here. So once we send this, this will be sent out as an email to that particular student. Now the preview in here is a little bit, different, but in the email when it gets sent out, I think I might have not added an enter in there. So anyways, the idea here is that you're not able to do images and content inline, but now you're able to do that. Not only can you do that, but now let's go ahead and pull up some of the saved replies in here that we had from before. And let's enter, now we can kind of highlight this and start adding links to that, or perhaps kind of formatting that a little bit differently with different styles or bulleted lists and so on and so forth. We can kind of text, align that. So it gives you the ability to do that a little bit better. Now, when I open the saved replies, this is probably one of the areas that you also noticed before. You might have noticed that we've added capabilities to have that in line directly in here. So now you can search for those saved replies. You can manage or create new ones. But when you manage those saved replies, it's now in the context of that. And as you add a new saved reply, you can now expand. You can have the same ability to upload those images as well in here, or emojis, or perhaps record a Loom video or a co-video to attach to it. So we wanted to make this as easy as possible for you to kind of have these responses to reply back to those students. All right, so while we're in the editor, we have saved replies, but also you can kind of take a reply that you already have in the editor, and you can actually, let's see. So you can actually save that reply directly. So once you've started to put that reply together, you can save it, and that will kind of make sure that it's there for everybody else to use as well. All right, the next thing that I wanted to show you in the editor, which is kind of somewhat of an enhanced functionality, is the ability for you to have private notes. And private notes, give you the ability to communicate and kind of collaborate with your team members in here. They also are going to get notifications. So now when you do an and you can, so you can start kind of, I'm going to pick Brian here. Sorry, Brian, if you're with the webinar, you might get a notification. Actually, you're not going to get any because this is the sandbox environment. So we can kind of send that as a private note in here, and that will be, again, not visible to the student, but this will be internally, and you kind of send a notification out. So this is kind of the enhancements to the editor. We feel like it's much cleaner, much faster. And some of the other enhancements you might have noticed in here is as I scroll down, if you have a lot of communications, we kind of keep track of which one you're reading and which one you're actually on, so you don't lose that context. We've added the ability to add kind of search, and we don't have the search on our sandbox environment, but I wanted to show you that in our development environment in here. So now we have the ability to search not only within the titles, but also within the different parts of that conversation. So you have the ability to do that. So you see working, it's available in here, and then working again, as part of one of those conversations parts in here. So now you can search across them, very similar to how you're doing with the Gmail or perhaps with Office 365. All right. A few different things in here that you might have also noticed is that you're able to manage conversations, assign those conversations to somebody. They're going to be assigned automatically to you once you start a new conversation, and then you can kind of tag them very similar to before as well. You can closing conversations, assigning them to different people. Now you might have noticed that you now see the person's, not just their email address, but name, but you also see their avatars. This is kind of part of the Bolt UI right? The ability for you to pick those people in line and have them kind of show up. So you're going to see these kind of selections everywhere, this nice little interface changes as we move things to Bolt. Adding favorites, closing conversations, closing that sidebar, and of course, kind of the ability for you to switch a channel. Essentially, what switching a channel does, it copies all those configurations, and then you can now switch to an SMS channel, and I can switch to that particular channel directly. Oh, I need a message in here. So what it will do is it will copy the configurations, and then you will just essentially start a new conversation, but from a particular channel, right? So you're not necessarily going to have that history, because we can't, have a SMS message be mixed up with with an email, because the content is a little bit different, right? So you can't send to an email, or you can send a large type of text to a particular SMS. So we need to know what's their primary channel in here. All right. So let's go back to our slide. So I think we talked quite a bit about the Bolt redesign. Oh, actually, before we do that, one thing to to understand here is that as I go back to those conversations, let me open up that sidebar and let me go to that profile, view full profile. But when I open the full profile in here, you're going to notice that conversations are no longer part of this kind of tabs over here. And the reason for that is because we're actually working on a new layout for profiles, which is going to be more contextual, boltified, the way we're thinking about it. And the conversations are going to appear, and a lot of things are going to open in context. And in this case, we have added conversations on the sidebar. And this gives you now the ability to essentially, everything that that you've communicated with Becky, for example, or your conversations, they're part of, or the students' conversations, they're part of that sidebar, right? So you have the same UI, the same kind of larger space to work with them. And that was one of the complaints that we always got, is like, well, can you make that space bigger? So now you have that ability to have that full kind of view of conversations. Now, of course, you can add a new conversation through here directly, or if you manage, you can kind of manage that particular. So you're going to notice it's like, okay, what happened to that sidebar, right? So we don't, you can now manage that sidebar through here because you don't need the context anymore. Okay, so I wanted to show you that before we moved on, because this is perhaps one of the things that you're going to notice as we kind of pop that open. So the next thing that we're going to take a look at is, or at least the biggest thing that kind of drove some of the changes that we did to conversations, or the rewrite, was around embedding conversations everywhere, right? And we had conversations that were embeddable in our Element applications, or the microsite, or perhaps the microsites or the landing pages if you went there with a token, but you couldn't take that same messenger and embed it, or conversation and embed it on your own website. So what we did is we now allowing for anonymous conversations. As part of that, because you're embedding it in other sites, we are now allowing you to have what we're calling this little icebreakers, which we're going to build upon to add a lot more capabilities for you to kind of show messages to students. But this is kind of our first introduction to having these icebreakers. So you kind of pique their attention as they're, traveling through your site. We have the ability to now display that conversation because we don't have the context of the user. You can now display it just on your admission site, and you can have those rules set up in there, and we'll just go ahead and take a look at that. And then the last thing is, obviously there's a lot more in here, but easily embeddable code. They're very easily embeddable, right? So now you can just take that code that we give you, and then you can embed it, and you can add it through Google Tag Manager, or you can give it to your web administrator and they can add it. But essentially, it will as long as you add it to the page, then you will embed conversations. And we're hoping that, this is the last embed code that you would need from Element, because we're moving towards just, funneling everything through this one embed code. And conversations and the messenger is the first one that's going to embed it through there. We're also going to use the tracking pixel through there as well. So you don't have to have it separate tracking pixels if you have conversations with that code embedded. And once we introduce other features, then we're going to do them through that same. So you don't have to kind of constantly embed things. So rather than me kind of talking about it, let's just take a quick look at it and what that looks like. So I'm going to keep with the Villa Maria theme here. And one of the things that you're noticing is that now I have, I'm not logged into this landing page, just an anonymous user, but I still have that messenger. So when I pop that open, it just gives me, hey, start a conversation. So, so I can now start that conversation in here. And what ends up happening is that if I go back to my conversations on my dashboard, you're going to see that now I have a known visitor. And what you're going to notice in here is that you're going to see exactly what the location of that unknown visitor or that message is coming from. So if I join this conversation, I can now reply back, and you're going to notice in here that the user gets a little ping. So now I'm communicating back and forth with that student. Great. So what ends up happening is that I close this and I go somewhere else. You get a little indicator here that there's a new message. But I go ahead and I go to the application page. And what you're going to notice here is that that messenger now, that context is also on I'm not logged in at all, but I have the same, kind of the same messenger in here. And as we're kind of moving from screen to screen, actually this is something that we need to double check, is that you're going to get that same messenger and those same messages throughout. So if that student is chatting with you on the admissions page and then now going to the events page, or they're going to a different landing page, and if you have messenger embedded on all of those, you're going to be able to, or they're going to be able to bring the context and bring the last conversation that they had with you, even though they were an anonymous user, because we're kind of tracking them underneath, right? We're keeping track of them in their browser on who they are. So that's pretty significant, because, and if they come back later on, right? If they go away and they come back, we're still keeping track of that, unless they kind of clear their cookies and clear all their browser history this way. We kind of forget and we don't know who they are anymore. So this is pretty important. One thing that some of you might be asking, it's like, okay, well, how do I get that student to, how do I know who that student is, right? Because now they're a known visitor. And one of the things that we can do is we can, we're going to be able to associate, I can associate now that person with someone that I have in here. So I can go ahead and I can start typing, the email of an already existing person in here, and it will associate that. So let me go ahead and again, sorry, Becky, but I am going to use your same email in here. So see if I can associate myself with that. So once I do that, it's going to say, do you want to associate this conversation with Becky, right? Because that's the email. And I can go ahead and confirm that, but I'm going to cancel it right now, because this is also going to show you what happens if you don't associate it right away. The conversation is still private, or is still anonymous, but Element has gone ahead and introduced something that's called, like, we now know and give you a hint in here and allow you to associate that. So the idea here is that if we receive a message from that email inbound, now we're going to have, like, we can match it to already existing user, and then you can just associate that if it's an anonymous the chat rather than the message. And one of the things that I don't have ready for you today, but I was going to show you, is that here, for example, this will probably be available before we release next week. But here is, we're going to ask the student right away, if they're anonymous, hey, can you give us your email address? And then we will let you know that the unknown visitor submitted their email address, and now we're adding it in here so it's available for you to associate them. So this becomes a lot easier, and now you can start using it as a lead capture. Obviously, this is just the beginning, right? Like, we're going to add a lot more capabilities around data capturing in here, forms, surveys, and so on and so forth. But we wanted to get the base conversations out. All right. So as we move on with the messenger, I wanted to now dig into the settings, because that's where you're kind of going to see some of those messenger settings. And the first thing that you're going to notice in here is I go to live chat, right? So that's the messenger live chat, is that I can enable or disable it globally. You can also enable or disable it. So I can add conditions in here, and I can say, I want to only add it to to a page where my page URL, let's say, contains this particular value, right? So let me remove just the HTTP just in case. And now I have the page URL as a condition in here. But also, if you think about it, now I can also add page path. So I can add admissions, and also contains /admissions, right? So this is how you would add it to different pages. Oops. But then the other part that becomes really important here is that you can also do it based on UTM parameters, right? So if you want people to have the messenger only if you are sending them there from your admissions campaigns, then you would listen for a UTM parameter, campaign content, or whatever, and based on that, it will show or hide that messenger. So this is on the conditions, and now if I go here and I refresh, that messenger is going to, pop up here. And if I go to my other page and I refresh and I keep on waiting, there is no messenger, right? So because of that condition, it shows up on this page. It shows up on the landing page, but it doesn't show up here. Same thing for our events. Now it kind of disappears from there, even though that code is still there. Like, you control visibility through the configuration of Element. So this becomes a lot easier for you to introduce it now to your to your staff and say, oh, I'm only going to embed this in our admissions pages, so you can only get questions about admissions. So as we go down here, the next thing we're going to see is that you can also change the positioning left or right. You can also change the avatar or the greeting of that conversation. So you can change those components in here. And the next thing that you're going to see is, like it says, we reply within a few hours. You can change it in a day or a few minutes. And you also now have the embed code in here. So all you have to do is copy that embed code and just add it very similar to your Google Tag Manager, and you'll kind of add that automatically. All right, so as we kind of take a look at the icebreakers, this is probably one of the more exciting features, because it gives you a kind of a taste or of introduction into messaging anonymous users on your website based on their context, right? So in this case, I can add an icebreaker, and the way this looks, it's very similar to this. I can say, give it, show it every day, right? If the student comes in every day, you're gonna show it every day or once, whatever. And you can now add a description for that. And then now I have the ability to have conditions for it as well. So in my conditions, I can say, show it only when I have this UTM parameters, UTM campaign contains, webinar. So I can set it up that way. And now in here, I can pick the title. And now as soon as I save this, I have that in here. If I go back to our page and I do a refresh, nothing happens. But let's see, and I'm doing this live. So UTM. So if I do this way, then so it's not showing for me right now. I probably just, wired something wrong in here. But the ability for you to kind of pull those UTM parameters, or depending on where you are, showing that okay. So you can have as many icebreakers as you need depending on the context that you're in. So that's going to make it really easy for you to now have the ability to, well, actually, because I was already in there, it showed me this. So I can probably just move them. And let's see if that will work. The joys of doing a live demo, right? Sometimes you should be a little bit more prepared. All right. So those are the icebreakers. We talked about conditional display. We talked about the easy embed code. We talked about the anonymous conversations and how to embed those throughout. The last part, or actually two components, two more things in here, is inboxes. So everyone has, like, great, I have conversations, I can send emails from there. But then what happens? That student replies back. Now they're replying back to an Element email address. What happens if they want to reply to an admissions@villa.edu, right? Where does that email go? Like, we want to be able to attach our team inbox to Element, so those messages that are coming in are automatically added to conversations without us having to copy and paste, or without that student having to reply to a different email address, which is an Element one. Well, that required a lot of work, and we have taken some time to think about it. And the way that when we came to a conclusion is that not only do we need the ability to do that for one email, but then we need the ability to have multiple inboxes. So we're calling them inboxes, and we have the ability, so each inbox, think about it as an email address or a phone number. And you're gonna have the ability to add multiple email addresses. So when you send communications out, it's gonna come from that phone number or your email. And when somebody replies back to that, it's gonna come through to Element in that phone number or email as well. So what we've done is that you can now use group emails, or for example, if you use Google Groups to have your distribution list, you can use that to forward one to Element. You can attach your personal or your Gmail account and your Office 365 account to Element as well, and we will bring in those messages automatically. We're probably not going to have this available right away, because we still need to go through the approval process on Google and Microsoft in order for them to verify. And we needed to release this inboxes in order for their teams to verify, like, the use case in here and go through that flow. So these will be, they're in testing right now. They're part of our development. I should be able to show you, but they are not going to be available until a little bit later in the month. But most of you are already using a group account, right? So you should be able to forward that to Element really easily and work exactly the same way. SMS inboxes, you can have multiple phone numbers now, so you don't have to figure out, okay, I only have one phone number if financial aid is working with it, or if graduate, undergraduate, if you have different kind of populations or different teams, they can use different phone numbers now in Element. Please let us know if you need another phone number or the CS team, and then we'll kind of go through that process of acquiring that for you. Inbound conversations. Not only now can you send conversations and student can reply to it, but Element will open up conversations as those inbound messages come in, and we're able to match that inbound from address to a particular student in our system. We're going to open up a conversation around that. And then we're going to kind of have this automatic associations, right, as part of that as well. So we're going to match who the message is from to the person in Element. So with that being said, let's go take a look at those settings and inboxes in here and kind of what they look like. So first of all, let me go back to our conversations in here. And one of the things you're going to notice is that when I add a new conversation, it's going to tell me where do you want to send it from. And there's a default email here. This is going to work out of the box. Everybody's going to have a default email address that you're sending from, which is currently what you're using in conversations. If this is a SMS conversation, you're going to have your default from number that goes out. But then you might have multiple email addresses, and you can kind of pick those as part of that. So that's kind of how you pick your inboxes, but the way that you would be able to create those inboxes is a little bit different. You have to go to those settings, and now under general, you have inboxes in here. So there's different types of inboxes, and what you're seeing here is that I can create an inbox and I can pick email or SMS. If I pick SMS, it's going to tell me pick one of the numbers that I have added, that I have available to me. And in this case, I can, obviously we have some test numbers in here, so they're not going to work quite right. But we can add more numbers to you if that's something that you need. So if I pick that, then I can confirm, and it will now create an SMS inbox for me here. By the way, you're going to have default inboxes, so you don't worry about that. We're going to default to your email or default email or the phone number that you're currently sending from. So if we look at the email inboxes, you have three different options in here: Gmail, Office 365, and other email account. And when you're looking at this, we can now go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to pick another email. And in here, you have now the ability to say, okay, when I send messages out from this inbox, I have the ability to say it's from, let's say, artists or, admissions. And I can say that I can pick the default address, or I can pick some of the other addresses that I have in my email settings, or I can add a custom email in here and say test2 or at element451.com, right? So that is going to verify that I'm actually able to send from this domain. But if I change this to element451, element45, this will come back and say that the domain is not authorized or email already in use. So I can't create an inbox if I don't have the ability to send messages to that from that domain in Element. So just some niceties in there that we've added. Default signature, so you're able now to add the signature to all those messages that go out. So you now have the ability to do that. And of course, can kind of add some emojis in there. So this will kind of go out with those messages, right? So admissions, so I create that inbox, it's going to say, okay, we need to also understand that you're the owner of this inbox, and we're going to send you an email to verify that you're the owner. However, I don't want to go through that flow right now because I didn't create this group before. So I can go ahead and actually, delete one of these inboxes, this test one. So I can go through that flow really quickly. So I'll now connect this again. And rather than picking that test 2, I'm going to pick. So that test 1 is actually a email. It's a Google group. And I'm going to show you that in just a second what that looks like. Okay. Let's create that inbox. It's going to send me that email registration. If you can just hang on tight for just a second in here as that mail comes through, I'm going to okay. So here is that mail, and it came to test 1 because this is a Google group. I can go ahead to the approval page, and I have to approve that I actually own that and just approve it. What this will do is it will actually confirm it. And then as I go back here, that's confirmed. You can see that that's already confirmed, and I can now continue. And what it will tell me is that, okay, great. In order to make this work, just forward your messages from that Google group to this address, and we're good to go. So I can actually go ahead and do that. Just give me 1 second here as I open up my Google Groups. Let's see. So here we go. That's that Google group that I had created. And now under my members of that Google group, I can just, add a new member, and I can essentially, oops. Copy that clipboard. Go back here. My clipboard copying capabilities are a little bit off over here. So I'm going to just see if I can copy it that way. There we go. So I'm just going to add that member. Is the primary, secondary alter. Okay. So one more time. Okay, so it looks like because of the inbox ID, this member is already added in here, and that's the message. So I apologize for kind of doing this live in here, and because I already had that group, it's the same inbox, so it's already added to that one. So I can confirm, and now everything is good to go. I have my test 1 inbox, and now I can send a message to my test 1. So I can send a new message to test 1 at element451.com. we shall see if I receive that. I don't think I have a user already in here, but if I did, then you probably see that message come through and being added to conversations as well. So we purposely have not added anybody to send messages right now and open conversations for those users, because we are afraid of some of the spam that might come in and kind of the overflow in inboxes. So we're only going to associate it if we already find the user in Element right now. We have the capability to open new conversations, but we're kind of tweaking that flow right now to kind of figure out what's the best optimized way to do that. All right, so those are, that is inboxes. And again, you can go through the same flow for Gmail, but now I need to confirm, and this is going to take me to my Gmail authentication screen, and it's going to add that as part of it. So like I said, our app still doesn't have approvals, so there's some glitches in there, or not glitches, but rather permissions that we need to work through. However, we'll have them available over the next few weeks. Okay, the last part that I want to show you is we've added in-app notifications. So one of the things that we've always noticed is that you come in and you're saying, well, how do I know that I have a new message if I'm in some other part of Messenger? And what we've done is that we've added a new icon in here, and you have those notifications that come through. So you're going to know if somebody came to your website and actually send a message or not. And we're going to kind of send notifications to only conversations that you've been assigned to, but you can be assigned automatically to new conversations as they come in, even anonymous ones. So with all of that being said, I think we're at the end, and hopefully this kind of gave you an idea of what we've kind of put together, where we are. In terms of the timeline, our hope is that we would roll this out early next week. And when you come in, you would see conversations on your screen. So right now, we are deciding on the date and what's appropriate that Monday or Tuesday. So we will kind of send out a notification as soon as that becomes available. All right. So we have about 10 minutes for questions. You can, yeah. So I guess one of the questions, how do we turn on the new one? Well, it's going to be there once we roll it out next week. So you're going to see it. You're going to see it all there. Okay, so let's see. Will integration with Gmail attach messages from Gmail into a student's record? Yes, it will be automatically associated with that. So if the student exists in Element and you receive that email from that student in Gmail, you'll automatically associate that message into Element. We essentially, the way Element works, one of the questions is, can we then just reply to students from Element or reply from a Gmail, and that reply from Gmail is going to be attached to Element? It doesn't really work that way, because the replies from Gmail, you're sending it from Gmail, but Element is actually getting a copy of that message and adding it as a conversation part. So this way it becomes really easy for us to change channels or do other things to it, but we don't touch your email in Gmail. And our recommendation is you reply to it from Element Conversations, and we're going to send that message out. It's not going to go through Gmail. It's going to go through the Element messages, but it's going to go through your actual address, right? Just like a communication or goes through. Will there be a dedicated URL to start a conversation in Element rather than the embedded end that folks can refer to in emails, links, etc. So if I understand the question, you're going to have landing pages, you're going to have applications, landing pages, you're going to have different kind of web pages, websites, and conversations is just a way you can embed it in there in any of those pages. So it's not meant to be standalone, right? You don't go to a, livechat.school.edu, and that's not the purpose of it. It's supposed to be where the student is, so you know what they're looking at, starting their conversation. Will we get an email notification from Element when the user sends us a message via chat? Can Messenger be enabled just during work hours? You will get a notification because you can be assigned to those notifications. So you're going to get an email through that. And the second question is, can you be enabled during work hours? That is something that we'll have to look into and add some of those additional parameters in there. Based on the date conditions, we have them in other places, but yes, that's something that we're planning for, but it's just not there in this first iteration. Yeah, otterbein.element451.com/chat. Yep. Any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat, or even raise your hand. Oh, Michelle. When you use co-video, you have to start a conversation first. Is that still the case with this update? No, it's not the case. You saw that you have the co-video or the Vimeo or the Loom button in there. So now you can add one to an existing conversation without a problem. I may have missed it, but is there the option to send a text to a random group of numbers without creating a segment? For example, financial aid gives a report to everyone that didn't complete. So I guess the answer is, can you just batch a bunch of users and send the same message to those? Right now, no, that the mechanism for sending batch emails is through our communications, and you have to do it through there. We don't have, these are just for one-on-one messages or one-to-many right now. So we don't have that group capability. Well, we do have the group capability, but we're not allowing you to send it to a group of people. Are there plans to add automation to the chat for times when no one is available to answer questions, weekdays and evenings? Yes, the answer is yes. So the reason why we rewrote a lot of conversations is because we wanted to add the chatbot capability and also the what we're calling automations. So first of all, you can reply back to students right now when you're not in the office through our rules. So if you're not using the rules in Element, that's a very simple way to go to settings, and you already have that, and you can go to automation settings, and in here you can add a rule to say or add a condition to say when the date, you can add a date condition and say if it's if the hour of the day is after a certain period of time, or if it's before this time or that time, then you can reply back with a particular message, right? So you add these conditions in there, then the action can be reply back, and their reply is, sorry, our hours are from, 5 to 9, we will reply back at this time. So you add that rule, and then now you have the ability, you can enable it, and you have the ability to, for that person to, for that rule to be replied back. But we will add more advanced automation capabilities, more advanced chatbot capabilities, where you can automatically kind of walk the student through filling in a form, or by student answering certain questions, you can have them register for an event, or provide an FAQ component to it as well. So those are in the works, but it's not available in this one. The architecture is all there. It's just that we wanted to kind of get this out first. Where can I find this recording and share with my staff? So we will send out the video recording afterwards. I think Michelle will probably do that afterwards to all the registrants.
Yep, I plan to send it out to everyone. Thanks.
Great. Can I confirm that Messenger tool can be embedded into our institutional website and all? Yes, that is exactly, yes, you can embed it. Stephanie, you can embed Element, the Messenger, now to any website that you want. The user does not need to be logged into anything in order to get that open. All right. So maybe we have time for one more, and all right. Well, thank you, everybody. This was great. You know, hopefully, as I kind of stumbled upon a couple of things, you know, we'll polish this up, and you should expect conversations to be available, or what you've seen today to be available next week, with the exception of a couple of things that we discussed. And think about it as this is, nothing changes for you unless you start using those new capabilities, right? So the only thing that changes is just the UI and kind of the user experience, but nothing, if you don't embed it on your website through that embed code, it's not going to appear there. If you don't add more inboxes, it's not going to appear there. If you don't add more rules or conditions, nothing is going to happen. So be cognizant of how you roll it out, how you roll that messenger out. If you're ready for it, depending internally how you want to talk to your team. But thank you again for joining us, and we will send out the recording, and let us know if you have any questions. Thanks, everybody.